Welcome back. Did you see the chain reaction demo out there? You all know potential energy, kinetic energy. So this next panel will transform your potential energy into kinetic energy. And I'm hoping they answer the question I have, which is, do I have to register as a trader, even though I'm making almost no money in my apps? So please welcome our panel.
A quick introduction, and we will get to your question briefly. I'm not sure if we'll answer it as much and as well as you wish for it to be answered, but that's the whole point of this panel. So today, in this session, we'll be talking about a bit different topics than what you've heard about today. We all know that this room is filled with developers, but I'm assuming that the room is also filled with entrepreneurs or people who are wishing to become entrepreneurs and go on their own paths. And so this panel will really be focusing on what it means to be going on your own path and then suddenly realizing that it's not just the business that you need to run, but suddenly you also need to pay attention to so many other things, including regulation. And we really want to dive a bit deeper into the topic of how does an entrepreneur, especially in the app economy, navigate regulations, what this means, and talk a bit more about specific topics also. So I am here with Donnie, who I think you've seen many times during these panels before, and I'm also here with Mitchell. So could we please just have a quick introduction, starting with Donnie?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Donnie. I'm sure probably half of you, hopefully, know a little bit about me. I make apps, I write books, I teach people how to be better Swift developers, and that does mean that I run my own business. And that also means that I sometimes come in touch with regulatory issues or questions or legal issues that I wonder about. Luckily, nobody's ever sued me so far, but yeah, there's a lot of rules to adapt to as an entrepreneur. And at some point, I met a representative of the App Association, and then I learned a lot more about policy, which we'll, I'm sure, get into.
Yeah, so my name is Mitchell. I started doing tech a really long time ago when I was writing what I now call spaghetti code in PHP to create a forum. I like to engage with people, create communities, and stuff like that. It was a really long time ago. I was in school. Well, anyways, it started to become less of a hobby when I added some career tooling on these communities. I became a recruiter, and now I'm back again building another app. Let's say it's a salary app, a salary insights app that I feel like is really interesting. One of the examples that we're working on right now is a module to be able to get an estimation on how it will impact you if you are a entrepreneur, but you're also working for an employer. What will it do with your taxes here in the Netherlands? What would it do with, well, all sorts of things, discounts and things that are very important, I think. So yeah, that's what we're working on right now, or I am working on, and that's where I am.
Yes, that's really great and really interesting, and it really leads into the next question of what is it, how did you choose to go on your own entrepreneurial paths, and what exactly are you doing? So we've gotten a really great introduction of your business, Mitchell, but Donnie, what made you choose to go on the entrepreneurial path?
Yeah, a couple of things, really. I think it's always been something that I was sort of eyeballing from the side. I have very risk-averse parents. Like, if you know Dutch culture, we insure everything. We never want to, make any mistakes. We're always scared that something goes wrong. So my parents are always like, "Yeah, don't start your own business. It's scary." But it's always been something I wanted to do. Then at some point, I started writing my blogs, and I was like, "Okay, this is kind of fun, and people like that." I wrote a book. People are actually buying that, and then I was like, "Okay, so I'm doing something. People are buying that. I want to do more of that. I want to have a lot of freedom. I want to make my own decisions." And then I kind of just jumped in, really without a plan. I basically, at that point, I think If I didn't have any income for 2 months, I would have just had to quit. I was very unprepared, but it turned out well, so I was quite happy I did it.
Right. It's a real success story. So, but so as we know, being an entrepreneur is not an easy job. And could I hear a bit more from your perspectives about more the regulatory perspective? What have you found? Has it been important for you to keep track of what is going in the world of government also, and why for you specifically? Maybe we could start with Mitchell.
Yeah, for sure. Well, one of the things, especially when we got into career tools and helping people find a new job or something like that, we started also processing a lot of private information, sensitive data that obviously needed proper protection and stuff like that. Especially whenever GDPR came into play, a lot changed for us. So it was very interesting to see what that had entail for every recruiter, but all businesses. We have a portal, we have an app, we have so many things that process data. How do you engage with that, and what does GDPR change? And it changed a lot. It also had side effects that were a little bit unforeseen and made it a little bit impractical for both the applicant and me, and the user of our apps. So one anecdotal one is for me personally, and it happens all the time, is whenever you have to send a GDPR removal request, you have to kind of like identify yourself in the email. And then you ask, like, can you delete my data of your servers? And in that email, because you're identifying yourself, there's a lot of data as well. I did that a couple of times. And then one organization actually had their Zendesk environment breached. And they held on to the email, and unfortunately more data was leaked because of the email than was on their servers in the first place. And this is something that I recognize in a lot of these newer, legislative frameworks that are being built. Is that I think the initiative, the intention is probably good, but there are some side effects that, make it a little bit, it adds attack factors to whatever it's trying to legislate.
Absolutely. Donnie, do you have anything else to add on that?
Kind of. So as I started my business, like I said, I was heavily underprepared. So I just was selling a couple things, people were buying that. So I was figuring out everything as I went. So it's like, okay, so there's laws around cookies. How does that work? There's GDPR. How does that work? And basically, it's if you're coming into it and you're not an expert, you either pay a lawyer to tell you everything you're doing wrong, which is quite effective, or you need some other means to figure out what's happening. And once you know what's happening right now, there's always things happening for businesses within the EU where there's new rules, there's new regulations, there's new things that might impact you, or maybe they won't. And I find that the hardest thing for me often is, like, how do I keep up with that? Like, how do I know what's happening? How do I know what's coming my way? How do I know whether that's going to impact me at all? And also sometimes, are there any opportunities for me opening up? So when the EU announced that Apple was going to have to allow other app stores, or to have to allow you to have other means of selling your in-app purchases, it's like, okay, so is that something where I now see an opportunity for me to maybe launch an app? Or is there a client of mine with in-app purchases who could qualify for no longer using Apple and paying 30%, but maybe they could use their own site? So there's a lot happening, and sometimes it doesn't directly impact you in the way that Mitchell just talked about with GDPR, where it could be an issue for you. It could also be, are there any new opportunities here because of rules and legislation that maybe just otherwise would quietly roll into existence and I wouldn't know about that?
Absolutely. And I think this is something that we see a lot with our members at ACT, the App Association. One of the biggest reasons and benefits I think that members get is being able to be informed and updated about new regulations. It's, of course, as an entrepreneur or a small business with just a couple of guys working together, it's very hard to keep track of everything that's going on. I mean, I work in policy, and right now in tech regulation, it's very hard for me to keep track of everything that is going on, and it's my full-time job. I think there's recently been a trend in the European Union of rolling out a bunch of new tech regulations, and it's been really hard to keep up with it. So I think the GDPR was already mentioned. Then I've heard that there was discussions earlier on the Accessibility Act, which is also something that people will have to be complying with soon. There's been the Digital Markets Act, which is also creating a new environment, and there's the Digital Services Act, and the AI Act, of course, which is still quite uncertain before its implementation. So, do you have any specific thoughts about these developments? Maybe we could go to Mitchell about like the impacts that these new rollouts of regulations are creating.
Yeah, for sure. It is very interesting because you always have these memes, for example, like the US innovates, the EU regulates. I don't think that's entirely true. We innovate a lot. We create a lot of great things that is really cool. Maybe our government does regulate a lot. It could also help with new opportunities. But I think, or at least the people that I hear a lot, developers around me, they're also saying it does add a lot of extra burden on, well, transparency reports or having to put your address on as a trader, sorry, for DSA, which could be kind of tricky for some developers. Others may, well, say like, oh, you can find me anyway. But like, right, it has certain things that could impact people differently. Now, and I feel like DMA is also one of those where it does make I think the initiative has a let's say a good intent, but it also has like unforeseen consequences as far as I can see that could impact security, could impact privacy, could impact like well, malicious people with malicious intent. Adversarial countries could use these opportunities as well to, well, try and do loads of things that already have happened, but on a really small scale. I think it's going to get bigger with legislation like this. So yeah, it kind of depends, but for me, I think that there are some things that we definitely have to keep talking about. We can't just say it won't have impact on security. I have seen some politicians say that, but I think it does. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like as somebody who is not into legal stuff, as somebody who is not great at reading legal documents, it can be really tricky to see all these new things that you're hearing about, like Accessibility Act. What does that mean for me? How much work, like how much responsibility is going to be on me as a contractor if I'm building something for a client and it's not accessible as the law states? Like, am I going to be in trouble, yes or no? And figuring that out on your own can be really hard. And so the one thing that I'm noticing more and more, especially with all the regulations that the EU is introducing, if you're actually trying to keep up with all of that and you're actually trying to do the right thing, it can really slow you down for a little while, where it's like, okay, so if I really want to implement GDPR correctly, how do I even do that? Right? Like for me, it means I use several external services. And I should have a lawyer look at this for me, because like I said, I'm not a legal person and I do want to do the right thing. And so the lawyer goes, well, you're not supposed to do this because now Gumroad has the email address of your customer. You can see that. So you need to make sure that Gumroad does all of this. So you need to, put that in your privacy policy. There's a lot of extra work to figure out. And if, for example, Gumroad would do something that is technically not allowed, I would already be breaking the law by using them or by not, implementing a policy in case something goes wrong there. Now, as one person implementing a policy, like in case a security breach happens for a third-party vendor, that is just, for me, it's like I wouldn't even know where to start, right? So there's so much stuff coming your way as a super small developer that you can use all the help you can get, even to just understand what you're supposed to be doing. A fun thing with GDPR is I have a friend who works for an agency as a contractor. The agency has a huge client, and he is a very friendly person. He loves to help people, and he loves to provide extra service. So they needed a staging server, and he's like, oh, I still have a VPS somewhere. I'll host your huge project for a well-known client who has millions or billions of revenue and has user data on millions of users. I'll put staging environment on my server, and I'll import production data to make the go live go smooth. What could go wrong? Of course, this huge client, they're a public service kind of thing. So what they do is they do a pen test on the staging server, and they find a way to extract user data. And so now the whole thing blows up in his face, where he's just like, I'm just one guy having a staging server. Like, this surely isn't my responsibility. It's the agency's responsibility. Turns out, you're a company that was hired by another company to provide a service, and you failed to comply to certain rules and regulations, and you might actually be in trouble if the company decides to sue you, for example. In this case, they just needed to file a report, and the company decided to not sue him. But I'm sure that was a millions contract where if the big client would have said, oh, we no longer want to do business with you because of this, he would have basically had to sell his house. So there's a lot of risk involved. He made a mistake. But it would have been really hard for him to exactly figure out what the rules are, how to respond to this. Like, he actually had to call me, like, how do I make such a report even in the first place? And I was lucky enough to have done that. Luckily not for my own company, but to have done that before, so I could tell him what to collect. But yeah, it's a whole thing. As a single person or a couple people, a lot of work, very scary as well.
Oh, absolutely. And we hear many of these scary stories from our members. It really is a difficult position to be in, to figuring out all of these
and it's
different...
one mistake just happens like that, boom, you're in a world of trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. So since we're talking more in depth also about specific regulations, I think we might take the opportunity to touch a bit more on also on the DSA. So the DSA is the Digital Services Act, which is in force now on European level. And one of the effects that it's had is that platforms, including app stores, need to keep a registry of traders' information for contact. But something that we heard from our members immediately reached out to us as soon as this became a requirement on the App Store, saying that the requirements were not entirely clear. Who is a trader? What is a trader? And when does this apply? We acted as soon as our members raised this, and we sent out a letter towards the Commission, an open letter. Since then, there has been a bit more clarifications on the App Store. There's a bit more in-depth discussion about how there has to be revenue involved, direct revenue from the activities, and that is what a trader is. But this is still a bit vague about what exactly does mean. Is there a threshold? What if the revenue is a very small amount? So we still think that the clarifications are not enough, and it's something we need to continue pushing on. I'm not sure if, Donnie, you had something more to add on this.
Yeah, that was actually a really interesting one where just sort of, I'm going to promote App Association a little bit here because you guys were super helpful there. I got a lot of questions on Twitter and like a lot of comments in that week. I have a tweet I send every Monday where it's like, what are you doing this Monday? And several people are like, well, this Monday I'm probably going to dox myself and like just have to, throw out my personal information there because of this. And then people are like, well, Donnie, you know all these things about development. Surely you know this too. And I'm like, look, I don't know anything about legal. I just know I am a trader because I'm a corporation. So like Mitchell said earlier, my info's out there anyway. Just Google my name and you can find where I live. It's not that hard. So I didn't worry about it too much, but a lot of people are super worried. And I emailed you all and I was like, well, what are we supposed to do with this? Because it's super unclear. And there's people out there with maybe 200 euros worth of revenue. Surely they're not traders. Like what these people are trying to do is they're just trying to make a couple of euros on the side and they're trying to pay taxes on it. That's all they want to do. Like they might have registered a small business, but they're not actually a business. They just want to make sure that they don't get like fined in a couple of years. And then you all, like you said, you drafted the letter, you sent it back, and we actually worked on that a little bit. So for me, that was a really nice moment where I was like, hey, look, it's actually very useful to have some contacts who are very close to all this. And if they are also confused, then it's not so strange that I am confused. So it made me feel a little bit better about myself, too.
Yeah, we're all confused. We're all confused. The difference is we do have some contacts, and we know how to navigate the EU bubble. So we know which numbers to call up. We know which emails to send the letters to, and we're hoping to start this conversation. I think this is a really great example of one regulation itself can cause so much uncertainty, but one of the big issues recently has been, as we discussed, the rolling out of so many regulations where there's overlap. It's not always clear how they overlap, how they interact. We were just discussing the other night that for a a data breach, there's like 4 different regulations, 4 different methods of reporting this breach. How does that help to be reporting in 4 different places? So right now in Europe, there's a big conversation of innovation versus regulation, which Mitchell already mentioned, yes, of course, these regulations are important and want to achieve important goals, but let's make them make sense. Let's make them not add more burdens. So, Mitchell, I think you have some thoughts about this topic specifically also.
Well, yeah, for sure. I think that too much regulation, too much legislation could have an opposite effect. Instead of helping smaller businesses, it might just, again, put an extra burden on anyone who's trying to innovate. But it could also, again, have very big implications on cybersecurity. And it kind of depends on which way you're looking at it. I know everyone has their own opinion, but for me, as far as I can tell and see on the internet, there are many experts that are saying that adversarial countries will try and take advantage of it. Now, as a smaller entrepreneur, you might not be involved in that, but like if something happens to the platform, it might lower overall trust in the platform. So if you're building an app for it, someone that's trying to experiment, which is something that happened since the smartphone, right? Everyone is trying to experiment with new experiences, new apps, which was kind of unheard of in the 2000 era where we all had PCs and people were actually kind of scared and maybe have even had 2 or 3 antivirus applications on their computer. Now we're just randomly installing something new and exciting. And that's good for us as a small entrepreneur. It's good to have new user bases everywhere where you can find them. But it has to do with the trust in the platform, and then on top of that, the perceived trust in the people using the platform to reach other people.
Okay, that's. I think we've covered the European law and regulation topics quite extensively. Since we're here in the Netherlands, we were thinking of maybe just touching on a small topic on also Dutch regulation that I think some people might be interested in here. So our members have kindly actually brought to our attention this Dutch law that is being updated and maybe causing some uncertainty also. This is the Employment Relationships Deregulation Act, the DBA, which, as all laws, is intended to have positive effect, but some of the uncertainties and some of the unintended effects might actually cause some harm potentially especially for smaller entrepreneurs. So could you please maybe give an explanation of what this is, why we should care, why do you care, and
Sure. Yeah. So I forgot the English long version of it, but basically it means that if you're a contractor working for businesses, for tax purposes, you're considered to be an entrepreneur or a company if you're your own boss, if you decide where and when you work, if you decide the parameters, if you decide the tools that you use and all of this. Of course, that's what they say. In reality, if I'm building an app for someone, I can't really say like, well, the tool I'm going to use is HTML. Then they're going to say, well, you have to do it in Swift because that's what we're using. But there's somewhat of like a burden of you have to be your own person, your own company, and make your own rules around that. And so far, they've never really enforced this too much. They basically were like, oh yeah, you have like a couple clients a year, so you know it looks fine. It's okay. But now, what they actually want to do is actually enforce the law. So a lot of companies are now thinking, okay, so hold on a second. If I hire this contractor to fill a position for 6 months or for a year, the tax agency might actually want, not even the contractor themselves, but the company to pay certain taxes on employment because you're employing somebody for 6 months. You're not hiring an expert to solve a specific problem for a limited amount of time, however the expert pleases. You're hiring somebody. You just want to be able to fire them quickly, and you don't want to pay all the taxes and insurances that you have to pay for an employee. So that's the idea. And I know several people here are actually already somewhat being bitten by this in the sense that companies are now no longer looking for contractors. There's several companies that I think most of us either have worked for or have been approached by. They kind of just cycle through contracts. You go from one to the next, back to the first, and you sort of loop through, and everybody meets each other in these different companies. And now they're like, hold on, we need to hire people. And so there's more contractors sitting here right now thinking, okay, how do I deal with this? Because saying, oh, but I have 3 clients is no longer enough. I've actually heard of people saying, oh, I'll incorporate and that solves the issue. And they're going to say, no, if you're the only person in your corporation, you're still just you, so the company is still not hiring another company. And then I actually read a story of one person who's like, well, but it's me and my wife in the company, so it's 2 people. And then they were like, no, because you and your wife are both directors of the company, and you're related, so you're still not a real company. Well, you're a real company, but not for purposes of this. So it's really getting a little bit scary for contractors. Like, if you're doing a lot of work here in the Netherlands, you might actually have a really hard time finding clients. I think they're going to enforce this next year or something like that. So, yeah, I think that's the summary of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have the same thing. I don't think I have much to add to it, but yeah, no, I do. This is again a good example of having good intentions, but yeah, might have implications on people that, well, shouldn't have implications on. At least in my opinion.
Yes, absolutely. It seems to be a bit of a trend.
Well, the worst thing is, like you say, it shouldn't have implications on certain people. The worst thing is a lot of our healthcare providers, people that come to your house and take care of your elderly parents, these are contractors, and these people might actually be in trouble because it's going to be really hard to hire them. And for them to become employees, usually for them, it means taking a huge pay cut. And I don't think anybody is happy to take a 50% pay cut ever. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the big takeaway from this conversation, and also what I've really seen and learned in Brussels, is that lawmakers know the law. They don't necessarily know the world, and they actually want to learn about the world. They want to learn about businesses. They want to learn about their real life consequences, but it can be hard. Just like it's hard for entrepreneurs to keep up with the law, it can be hard for lawmakers to keep up with the world, with the businesses. So what I've learned is that lawmakers do want to hear from people, from businesses. So if you have concerns, I do encourage you to follow things, and if you have a concern, try to find a number, call them up, tell them what you think, or come talk to us and ask us what we think and what we would recommend for you to be the path of having these conversations. But we think there's hope. We think there's conversations. Right now, there's a big conversation in Brussels on the EU level of wanting to maybe streamline things, to harmonize things, to make things easier. There's a big conversation around innovation and versus regulation and how Europe is versus the US and what we should do to catch up. So it's a big conversation, and I think this is the time to start talking. So
Definitely, yeah.
I think that's the message that we want to leave.
Yeah. I just want to add to that. As a member, what I think is really cool, because it's all very abstract. Like, it's like, I'm just little old me, and you know, there's some people out there making rules and laws. But once I signed up to be a member, I was a little bit skeptical, and then at some point, I actually found out that even if I didn't know everything about the law, like you said, they're actually interested in hearing about small companies. And sometimes you organize things like a call where you actually get to talk to people who are, you know, interested in hearing, and you, as an individual, just you, not a legal expert, get to tell your story. And then sometimes the coolest thing is when you do that and you read the law, you're like, that's some of the things that I was concerned about. They actually listened. So that's something that really blew my mind, where it's like, holy crap, I'm just not even an expert, and I'm able to somehow give my thoughts and opinions and be heard. That was really cool.
Absolutely.
Just wanted to add that.
Yes, and it's happened. Yes, both Mitchell and Donnie have been on calls with regulators before. So yeah.
True. And I got a lot of advice also on things that I was very concerned about that might impact apps that I was trying to create. And then the ACT Association also told me it's probably more for the bigger companies that are working on bigger AI systems.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was pretty helpful for me as well. So yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Donnie and Mitchell. That was really insightful. And we can continue the conversation later outside if any of you have questions or comments. Sure.
We have time if you have questions that you'd like to ask them.
Hello. Thank you very much for the interesting discussion. Now, what I hear a lot and also hear a little bit is that developers, entrepreneurs are unhappy with regulators because they make our life harder. But on the other hand, especially from computer people, if I may describe as such, there's very little engagement in the political and policy process. So, for example, if you look in the Netherlands, but also in the European Parliament, at the backgrounds of the people sitting there as representatives, as elected officials, you basically have nobody with an IT background. So I don't think it's very surprising that the laws that they're making maybe are a little removed from reality. So maybe we should actually kind of get our own act together. And I didn't know about the App Association. I assume this is what you're trying to do. And actually engage with this process. And as you're saying, people are interested to know what the problems are. And so it's maybe a little bit on us. So I was wondering what you think about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is spot on, and I think that's the exact reason why we're here, why App Association exists, why I'm happy to join this panel, because when you get to listen to also the questions they have, you're like, these people are really good at law, but they're terrible at knowing what Apple does. Like, in one conversation, they were like, so what data does Apple even have about your app? It's like, well, they have crash reports, they have analytics, they have all this, and they went, okay, can you access that? I'm like, no. They're like, well, you should. It's like, well, I think so too. And then they would have never have known if they hadn't actually been able to talk to people, and they're really willing to do that. We just have to find ways to, reach them. And you and me, we're not going to do that. But with the help of, some association with people that are really good at this and have the connections, then suddenly we can send an email saying, basically whatever you want. If you're like, I don't like how this works, I'm not sure how that works, you can email and they can tell you like, yeah, that makes sense. We'll see if we can get that in front of someone. So they provide the technical part, and then you have the legislator, and then hopefully beautiful magic happens when they touch.
You're absolutely correct in what you're saying, and that's exactly as also Donnie said, that is the purpose of what we do. I would like to say, I think lawmakers are, even if they wouldn't always say it, they seem to be very self-aware of the fact that they don't always know about the markets that they're dealing with. So they do want to listen, and they do seek out opinions and perspectives and technical expertise and knowledge. This is really missing on the level of regulators. Currently, I think talking to regulators is really difficult. It seems to be a very complicated process, and for big companies, it's easier. But for smaller companies or entrepreneurs, it can be really difficult to find the right paths to have these conversations. And I think sometimes that voice is the one that's missing. So really finding that path so any one of you could also have these conversations. I think that's really, really important, and that's what we try to make happen.
Yeah, so maybe we have to learn from other business sectors and get a bit more politically active and have lobby groups like other industries have and have got in Brussels. So that's how they do it.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions?
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for the interesting talk. Oh, didn't have the mic on. I have a question based on the Going Indie talk from yesterday, inspired by it. There are ways to insure yourself so that you're not financially liable, certain business setup structures, etc. And I was wondering, for anybody considering going indie, to what extent do you think it's necessary for someone starting out to insure themselves beforehand?
That's a great question. I think it depends on what you're intending to do, right? So if you are going to be a contractor and you're not going to be dealing with a ton of data and that kind of stuff, you probably just want some liability insurance that if you make a mistake where some payment service goes down and the company claims they've lost millions of euros because people weren't able to buy something for 15 minutes, that you can just say, you know what, sue me, we'll figure this out with insurance, and they will get what they need. I think if you're building something where you're dealing with a ton of users, you probably have more insurance than just the liability, because you deal with tons of user data. So I would ask somebody with expertise on this, a lawyer or something like that. Like, this is what I want to do. This is my risk profile. They'll help you create that. And they'll tell you this is the insurance you need. If you're at the beginning, because you said I'm inspired by the Going Indie talk, liability is probably all you need, because you're not going to be dealing with the amounts of data or money that would make it scary. If you are scared of, like, for example, the story of my friend who I was like, he might have to sell his house if it went badly. He has a ZZP, eenmanszaak, which means that everything is on his person. If you want to avoid that and you're like, I'm going to be dealing with a ton of stuff, go for a corporation immediately, because at least then, as long as you're managing everything correctly and you're always trying to do the right thing, if you can prove that, then the worst thing that can happen is you go bankrupt, but at least you get to keep your house. So,
Yeah, I definitely get legal advice. That would be my tip. Just, make sure that you have proper legal advice.
Yeah, thank you. Very useful.
For someone who's indie or thinking of going indie, what are the services that your organization would provide to them?
So what ACT, the App Association, would provide is, I think that it's a two-sided thing. I like to say that we are, in a way, translators, and we facilitate conversation. So on the one hand, we facilitate the understanding of legal and regulatory developments. Laws are often very complex. They use very specific legal language, and that's what we are specialized in. So we follow this, we track this, we monitor it, all the different sources, and we put it in one place. And if we find that there's something that's important for our members, or if our members mention specific things that they care about, we will track that. And we make sure that these information is provided in a clear and simple way that translates into business. This is one side of the translation and the conversation. And then we also provide the other side of the translation and the conversation, which is talking to our members, listening to what they care about, listening to their reactions to the legal and regulatory developments, and helping create the communication towards the regulators, helping them create this messaging and translate it in a way that will fit into the legal conversation, create the opportunities to get together with regulators and have these conversations. So as said, Mitchell and Donnie have both been on roundtable calls with the European Commission, talking about specific laws and regulations that they've made, giving them feedback about it, about how to adjust it, what are the little technical details that must be considered, and they also ask a lot of questions. So in practical terms, I think that's what we would have to offer.
Thank you. I think there was a question over here.
Hello. I would like to ask, like, because you were mentioning about this, the trader and non-trader. Like, I am trader, but I was able to select non-trader option, and then I also, like, in Google Play Store, they have also, like, they now there's a verification process. Like, you need to really, like, give your address to them, and then they just accept, like, official data. the something like, I don't know, like ID or something like that, the address. So it's like, is it going to be, isn't it dangerous to put your address and then it will be visible to everyone? And in the Play Store, if you enable in-app purchase, like they write like it's going to be visible. Your address is going to be visible if you are making money.
Yeah.
But in also for the non-trade, like they could just at some point that they could just figure it out like you have in-app purchase and you are making money, and then why not you didn't choose trader option? Like, what was the idea behind this address visible to everyone? And then how can we avoid, or what should we do? Because I wouldn't want to share my home address. Like, what should I do? Should I don't know. I would like to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I have to say we don't give legal advice, but we do follow the developments, and we will. What we're trying to achieve is to get the clarifications so that this can be given to you. But what you're raising is exactly what our members brought to us, exactly what everyone is worried about. I think there's a really big oversight here, which I think the regulators didn't even think about, that if you're an entrepreneur and you're operating on your own name, it's your own personal information, it's your own personal data that you have to make available. Of course, for a business, you might have your business address, business number, but if it's your own personal data, that can create all kinds of risks. So I think this must have been some kind of an oversight from the regulators' side, and this is something that we have been following up. I'm happy to share with anyone interested our letter on the DSA. We sent this letter to the Commission, and we're continuing to push on this. There's been some good developments, but I think we need more. One of the things we raised is, so the reason actually for this trader registration is it's a consumer protection law in this context. And from what I've understood so far is they wanted to give consumers an opportunity to contact people who consumers pay money to. It's an opportunity to have this contact that if you make payments, you will have the contact details so you can have conversations with these people. But of course, this is why not all categories of revenue making should apply to this model then. I think we need more clarification on that, on what exactly is trader and in what context does it apply. Also, the DSA created exceptions for like MSME platforms because it's very burdensome for them to do this. One of the questions we raised up is, why can't there be an exception for some of the traders to not have to register? Let's say if you're an independent entrepreneur operating on your own personal data, why can't we have an exception for that? So there's a lot of interesting conversations right now. I mean, I can tell you in private a little bit more about what I think, but I can't give you advice right now because it's still so unclear, unfortunately.
All right, thank you so much.
Please thank the panel for their information.
Thank you.